Hello. I've recently gone vegetarian, and I went vegetarian because I had this thought in my head when I was eating meat. I was having trouble. First of all, I was having trouble swallowing my food, which was really horrible. And I was on a soup diet for about 3 weeks, and a soup and liquid diet for about 3 weeks because I was on medication that was leaving me unable to swallow. I was swallowing too soon, and I it felt like I was going to choke on my food, and it was really awful. And that was horrible. And so I was eating some meat one day, and I had this thought that said something along the lines of, how would you feel if we ate you, if you were eaten by something else, as a human, because humans ultimately are animals. And that, well, you could argue that they're above animals, but they're still animals in the end. And I was just thinking, no, I wouldn't like to be eaten, and I think it'd be horrible. And so I kind of stopped eating meat from that point on. And I recently watched Earthlings, the documentary about animals, and I find it really terrible, really. I wrote something on my website which I'm trying to find. What I took away from it was that most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own kind, of one's own group, i.e. they're not human, so their suffering is somehow justified. Not just the meat industry, but clothing, sport, medical and scientific research. Like, everything. It's just ridiculous how just because we're lords, just because human beings are top of the food chain and basically think they're lords of the earth, they think they can do anything, and they can't really. They can't keep treating the planet like a dustbin and keep ruining it, basically. It's really ridiculous how they just, like, landfill sites, climate change. It's just really ridiculous. Everything's suffering because of it. And I wrote on my website, I went a bit off on a tangent, but I put on in my little book, most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own kind. And if you think about this on a big scale, you think literally every war or conflict has been started because of this very line of thinking. If we treat our animals like this, no wonder there are wars and atrocities. I mean, just think of how many religions have been started over that statement. Most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own kind. People think in wars that they go into wars and they think it's not really, it's like some people think they know they're in for a hard time, but they think the other person's going to have it worse, and it's just because they think they're not in their group. They think it's okay to start a war against another group. And I know I was talking about vegetarianism, but I think that rings true for a lot of other things, and this quote kind of says it. So, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. Leo Tolstoy. And so I think, because I don't know where I'm going with this. I kind of get tongue tied, and I just think it's really ridiculous. I read what I put on my blog because I get really tongue tied. So I just finished watching Earthlings. It's a documentary about how animals suffer for human gain, be it in the meat industry, clothing, sport, or scientific research. My eyes are well and truly opened. They were opened before, but this was just quite. But this was just was just. But that was just quite a reality check. It's so disgusting how people think they can just do whatever they want and treat fellow creatures like shit just because. What I took away from it is this: most people think suffering is justified because victims are not members of one's own group. This first sentence could be used to describe every war and conflict virtually on this planet, and it's true. Think of how many wars are fought over the opposing people being different to the aggressor. It's like, okay, just because a person is not like me, we can harm them or kill them, and somehow they will not suffer as I will. So it makes suffering okay. It's dehumanisation at its simplest level. It's what the Nazis did to the Jews. This quote explains what I'm trying to say. Wow, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there'll be battlefields. However, in the context of the film Earthlings, the above quote reads, most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own group, i.e. not human, so their suffering is somehow warranted. People have completely the wrong idea. They think just because they're top of the food chain, they can be lords of all they survey, when in reality that privilege comes with responsibility. I think people aren't going to stop eating meat anytime soon, but I hope more people will realise the inherent suffering that goes into your steak. I just think it's I think that really got to me. Most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own kind, one's own group. And I know that was first said. I don't know who first said that, but that was said in that documentary Earthlings about how animals suffer. But it's also very linked to how we suffer as people because people suffer because they think other people are somehow of a different group are lesser than their group, and like terrorists think that their personal group is being ostracized against or I can't think of the word, or dehumanized against, when in reality it's not as plain cut as that. And it's just really, that statement could be said about so many things. And I get tongue tied a lot, and I'm not a great speaker, but I used to be quite good at speaking, but I lost my confidence with TMAU, and I don't really get a chance to speak a lot like this. So I think it's really, really sick, really, because that most people think suffering is justified because the victims are not members of one's own kind. That can be said about literally any political or religious war or something like that, and it's really ridiculous. Just because someone thinks this group is different than this group, it's okay to attack this group or something like that, and it's not. And I just think more people need to be aware of that, really, and it might truly open a lot of eyes. But what can I do here? I'm just one person, but one person can do a lot sometimes. But well, that's what someone said, but I can't remember who said that. But I just think it's pretty sick, really. A lot of things are sick, but I'm going back to vegetarianism. But that quote resonated with me on a deeper level, because I thought that it represented a deeper kind of struggle, and it does, really. And I think it represents so much more than just like the meat and vegetarian debate. I think it really does. And I just find that really eye-opening, really, and I wanted to share that. So I'm gonna go now. If I'm tongue-tied sometimes, it's because I'm not used to speaking, and people don't normally listen to me. So well, some people listen to me, but I don't really speak my mind very often, and this is my chance to speak my mind, so I'm going to go now. Goodbye. Bye.